Welcome to Hack Your Happiness.
Eating disorders are like the end manifestation of suffering that's been going on a long time that the person wasn't able to address for one reason or another. So by the time the eating disorder shows up, they have really been going through stuff.
Are you a teen or adult looking for more happiness in every day and ways to connect with people in your life?
You've come to the right place. Hack Your Happiness is a podcast designed to bring you the behind the scenes of what brings iconic individuals happiness, plus their life hacks.
I'm Mercedes.
And I'm Anastasia.
And we're the two teens behind Small Bits of Happiness.
We're interviewing Olympic athletes, entrepreneurs, celebrities, and more.
Throughout all of our episodes, you'll find great conversations, hacks that you can take away and try in your life, inspiration, as well as unique and surprising insights. Today, we're talking with Dr. Jennifer Gaudiani. Dr. Gaudiani is the founder and medical director of the Gaudiani Clinic. Board certified in internal medicine, she completed her undergraduate degree at Harvard University, medical school at Boston University School of Medicine, and her internal medicine residency and chief residency at Yale. Dr. Gaudiani served as the medical director for the Acute Center for Eating Disorders prior to founding the Gaudiani Clinic, which is a Denver-based outpatient eating disorders clinic. It's dedicated to people with eating disorders and disordered eating. The Gaudiani Clinic provides weight-inclusive and fat-positive medical care and embraces treating people of all shapes, sizes, and genders. The Gaudiani Clinic is licensed to practice in 47 U.S. states and offers international professional consultation and education. Dr. Gaudiani has lectured nationally and internationally, is widely published in scientific literature, as well as on blogs, is a fellow at the Academy for Eating Disorders, and is a former member of the editorial board of the International Journal for Eating Disorders and the Academy for Eating Disorders Medical Care Committee. Her first book, Sick Enough, A Guide to the Medical Complications of Eating Disorders, is available on Amazon. Welcome, Dr. Gaudiani.
Thank you so much. That was so much to go through. That was very kind.
Thank you. I mean, you've accomplished so much and your story is so inspiring. So we're so excited to be speaking with you here today.
I'm super psyched to be here. Let's do this.
Awesome. So you're currently an extremely successful eating disorders therapist and expert and have a clinic with a number of very qualified individuals who work alongside you. As a physician, as you studied internal medicine, how did your journey to this field begin?
Fabulous question. So I chose internal medicine because I was an English major in college. In fact, I focused on close reading poetry. So I really struggled through my pre-meds. And what I found, having gotten into one med school, was that I really wanted to hear people's stories. I wanted to hear the narratives of their lives and really listen to the language that they used so that I could bring medical expertise and so they could bring their whole selves. In addition, I have a sister myself who had an eating disorder. And so she developed hers while I was in med school and was sick for a really long time. And she's been really generous to allow me to say publicly that she was my muse and inspiration. But it was in watching her go through her eating disorder and watching others in my life go through illnesses and not really be listened to by doctors that kind of gave me my passion for how I wanted to approach patient care. But I just kind of got lucky when I moved to Denver with my husband and then toddler daughter. I have two teenage daughters myself. Back in 2007, I had the opportunity to help grow and run the nation's top medical stabilization hospital program for adults with anorexia. And I just learned all of these medical things that happen to bodies when they're not fed. And I learned also from these beautiful, magnificent humans that I just totally fell in love with about what was happening in their brains and how their brains were influencing their bodies. And so I got to do that for 8 years. And I was like, these are my people. This is what I want to do with the rest of my life. I never trained formally in mental health, but I learned along the way from my beautiful patients and from the amazing therapists and dietitians whom I got to interact with. And so when I founded the clinic in 2016, it was because so many patients said, I've just gotten really bad medical care. I walk into my doctor's office and I've just been in treatment. And the first thing someone says is, oh, you look healthy. And my brain blows up because I think one thing when they say the word healthy and it's not a good thing. Or when I was really sick, I wasn't underweight and I would go into the doctor's office and I didn't want to get more care, but I also knew things were wrong and they would just ignore me. Or they would recommend a diet and weight loss, and it harmed me so much. So when I started this clinic, I was like, this is for those people. And because I obviously am not going to be able to actually have one-on-one relationships with all of the humans that I would love to, I wrote the book and I do podcasts and I write blogs and I do little video lets in order to try to improve the quality of medical care for people with eating disorders around the world, and really to do it from the lens of someone who is super focused on autonomy and really like respect and deeply, richly knowing the whole person. And I do have a feminist lens. I'm proud of it. I also have a social justice and size positive lens, because I think you can't do this business without that and actually have an authentic voice in the community.
I absolutely love that, and I love how you took your personal experiences as well as kind of a gap and an issue that you saw in the field of eating disorders and the treatment out there for them, and provided a place for people who struggle to improve that. And I think that that's amazing and so needed.
I think it's just so amazing how you also, you didn't need a whole bunch of expertise. You just kind of followed what you loved. You talked to all these amazing people and you learned through your experiences, which I think is also so much more important sometimes than, specifically going to school for something. And I'm sure that while building everything, it must have been very difficult. So what were the challenges that you went through?
What's one of the biggest challenges you would say to this field?
Like in terms of being a businesswoman or in terms of being a doctor, what?
I mean, I guess you have so many amazing roles, whichever, and in the form of building the business that you are in, what would you say was your biggest challenge?
I mean, I think the biggest challenge in building the business is that it's a really high overhead business, which means I need to have hired the most amazing people, which I have. I'm so lucky, because patients with eating disorders need a lot of support. We need to make sure that when somebody answers the phone, they are like known and cherished, and that people on the team know exactly what's going on in the eating disorder field, and that we know how to communicate with a team. And it just takes a lot of money to do that. So I acknowledge that I've been really lucky that my husband has been able to support our family, because I have only taken a year and a half of salary out of the last 7 years, because we just don't make enough money to pay me. And I'm not, no playing any small violins for me. I recognize my financial fortunes, but like, I think that's been one of the most challenging things, is that like I work super hard and I love what I do so much, and I don't get paid for it because it's just a business that requires a lot of resources. So that is a challenge as a businesswoman. I also love being a businesswoman. I love creating a workspace that like embraces and honors the women who work for me, where unlike in some spaces that are sometimes run by men, sometimes, not all, we're not here to like prove our worthiness. We're not here to like overwork in order to show that we're allowed to work here each day. Instead, we bring our like passion and we work really hard. And then at the end of the day, people go home and they set their boundaries, and we're not doing email and calls at all hours, even though that means my patients like don't have someone to talk to if they have an emergency after hours, which isn't optimal for them. But it means that like we're honoring ourselves as women professionals in a way that I think feels really sustainable. And I think it's actually important for my daughters to see that too, because they can see that you can be a professional and have time to be a mom and a self and a best friend and a wife and a whatever else you want to be, that you don't have to like sacrifice it all at once.
I love that so much. And you're right, like as a teenager, it's so amazing to like learn through that example and see someone be so successful and passionate. And first of all, realize that not everything is about money, and your passion truly is so fulfilling, as well as, see that you can have a life along with a very successful career. And I love that so much.
I think it's so important to have that work-life balance, because I feel like what I'm really excited about, especially with, I feel like almost a new era is coming where, boundaries are just so important and have been more and more valued over the years.
I agree. Now, there's so much that hasn't been talked about regarding eating disorders and troubles with food, especially for teenagers. Have you seen an increase in patients after or during the pandemic?
Absolutely. So many reasons. One is that diet culture is everywhere. And unfortunately, my generation, like the parent generation, is really problematic with it. And we ourselves come with old injuries from our homes of origin. But all anybody ever seemed to talk about during the pandemic was the fear of gaining weight. And you just know that the parents were out there being like, I'm going to try the Whole30, I'm going to do this or that, or if I'm going to be home from work, I better not gain weight. And I think that they just talked about it carelessly with their kids, and their kids were like, oh my gosh, like, what does that mean for me? Like, if you're so worried about that, like, should I be worried about it too? And so there was just a lot more focus on weight, unfortunately. And because then there was also more loneliness. And I feel like teenagers often get to the stage where they love their families, but they really need their friends. It's like a flip-flop from their youth. And you guys just didn't get that. You didn't get that. And so you were isolated from your peers and you didn't have that outlet, and things got really awry. So yes, unfortunately, we saw a big increase in eating disorders in teens over COVID.
Yeah, I agree. It was a tough time, and I think for both teenagers and as well for adults and parents, I agree.
I think the pandemic just took a toll on everyone, and then afterwards with all that focus, I mean, for example, if all you ever hear about that and that's all you think about because you don't really have a positive way of spending time away from all of that, that's all your mind really thinks about, and that's all you really do. And I think that definitely took a toll on a lot of people. So what would be your top 3 tips for teens dealing with stress and challenges?
Put a name to your emotions. Like, it's okay to figure out how you really feel, because sometimes it's just easy to be like, I'm really mad or I'm really frustrated, and that's where it ends. But like, give yourself the space to go deeper and be like, am I betrayed? Am I lonely? Am I envious? Am I exhausted? Am I overwhelmed? Am I burned out? Like, really richly name what is it you're feeling? Because often when you give it a name, it's like a solution starts to open itself up a little bit more if you can really honor what your soul is feeling. So I would say, like, give it a name. The second thing is, I would say, be kind that you have needs. Like, acknowledge that we all have needs. And there can be this American myth that like people who are really successful like don't have any needs at all, and they're just like they've got it and they're perfect and they've got everything figured out. And that's, I don't know if I can swear on this, so I'll just say that's baloney. And the truth is that when we know what we're feeling and we're kind to that emotion, instead of being like, I'm so mad that I feel that way right now, I shouldn't feel that way, it's stupid, just be like, oh, this is painful for me right now. Okay. And then like advocate for ways to meet your need. And again, that seems like it can be so simple, like, okay, but the truth is that a lot of people don't practice it because they don't necessarily see it be role modeled. A lot of adults around you will like not speak their feelings because maybe they're trying to like spare you or hold a boundary, which is not, kids should not be their parents' therapist. If they have needs, they may ignore them or be unkind to them and be like, what I need to do is chill on the couch for 2 hours, but I have to go exercise, so I've got to go do that right now. And then 3, they don't know how to meet their needs. Or when you're a kid, it can be really hard because your parents may control how you spend your time and how you get to have your needs met. But one of my favorite sayings in our house is, what do you need right now? So like the girls come home, we're sitting at family dinner, and they're like, oh my God, I'm so tired and I'm so frustrated that I have math homework right now. And like the commonest thing to come up next, like I think in my childhood, everyone was like, well, you have to do math homework. Everyone has to do math homework. In fact, I did more math homework than you did when I was younger. But instead, if the answer is like, what do you need right now? Do you need to go like talk to your friends? Do you need to go chill for a while? Do you need to go watch Grey's Anatomy? Do you need to go for a walk? Like, meet your need right now, because then you're more likely to have energy to do what you actually need to do that like takes more thought and maybe not be as fun.
I love that, and I love those 3 tips because I agree. Like sometimes you're like, oh, I feel sad right now, but sad is such a large plethora of things. It can mean this or it can mean that. And I think when you go deeper and you really ask yourself, why do I feel sad, or why do I feel mad, or why do I feel even happy, then you can find out more about yourself and more about what's feeding that emotion.
And a way that I like to kind of treat it is, and think about it almost, is treat yourself like you would treat a friend. So kind of like think back and let's say think of yourself as your friend, and how would I go about this? How would I, if they're really tired, would I tell them, oh, you should just power through, what would I tell them? Take a break, maybe take 30 minutes and relax a little bit so you have the energy to do that.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think it's just important to treat yourself like your best friend, and I think that also will help you find more self-love.
And also not to, get upset at yourself for feeling a certain way, because
Exactly.
our emotions, they're telling us something. Our emotions are like information, and so it's telling you maybe you need rest, or maybe you need to distance yourself from a toxic friendship or relationship.
And
or
that's
maybe,
also what's really helpful with like finding out about how you're actually feeling, because you might be feeling sad, but you're actually feeling betrayed. And by finding that kind of out, again, like you said, the solution kind of, starts to appear, and you can finally find a way out of feeling that way, so you can, end up feeling more happy. And
Yeah. So, what would you say regarding eating disorders? And obviously, there's so many different reasons why some teenagers might struggle with eating and their perspectives on food, but what would you say is one of the most significant reasons why adolescents and adults resort to controlling and restricting what they eat? And what's the best way that you can help somebody that you love and care about if they have this challenge?
Yeah, such good questions. So it actually, anyone who tries to say eating disorders are simply about this is selling you something that doesn't exist. Eating disorders are super complicated. And we like to say that they're a complicated biopsychosocial entity. So they have biology in them, they have psychology in them, and they have social elements in them. And all of those matter. And how much each one matters for an individual is going to be totally unique. But actually, your prior question really matters for this answer, because I have come to feel in many cases that eating disorders are like the end manifestation of suffering that's been going on a long time that the person wasn't able to address for one reason or another. So by the time the eating disorder shows up, they have really been going through stuff. And it's almost like their soul is like, hey, somehow you're not able to listen to my needs. We're trapped. We don't have independence. We don't have a voice. We're not allowed to have the emotions we need to. We're in a situation that's really, really overwhelming or really traumatic or really scary. Eventually, the body's like, we have to sort of show people physically that there's something wrong, because somehow I'm not being listened to. And so eating behaviors can change, and it's easy to pick eating behaviors because fat phobia and diet culture is everywhere. And it ends up sort of looking like just an extreme version of what your parents, coaches, teachers, classmates, cousins are already kind of doing as they talk negatively about food in their body. So it's not like totally different, but it ends up being a manifestation of like, hey, things aren't okay. Things are not okay. And it's so easy to just paint eating disorders as like the bad guy or an abusive relationship. And there are elements of it that match that. But I think it's much more compassionate to like turn in and hold your heart and be like, what were the ways in which this eating disorder actually helped me at first? What were the ways in which it was trying to save my life? Because something that's that serious is going to start out from like a good place. The majority of us have souls that are trying to do right by us. And so eating disorders can start out trying to solve a major problem. And at first they can seem like a miraculous solution. Like, oh my God, I'm numb. I'm numb either by restricting or by purging or by binging. Like, I'm not feeling it as much anymore. Oh, it's such a relief. And like, there's so many ways in which eating disorders can start out helpful, but they never end that way. Every person with an eating disorder at some point thinks, maybe I'm the one who's different from everyone else. Maybe I'm the one who doesn't have problems from it. Maybe I'm the one who, will have a disastrous outcome if I start to recover. They think like I might be the only one like myself. And we call that terminal uniqueness. That's a comment that's used in the substance abuse world, where like you think because you might be the only one, you're allowed to continue doing certain behaviors, or you don't have to change because you're the one who's different. It doesn't come from a place of ego. It's actually the opposite. It comes from a place of like lack of self-confidence and stuff. But by the time that stuff is going on, just people need to be surrounded by love and boundaries and a statement of like, whatever has been going on, you always deserve good, consistent food throughout the day, plenty of it, as much rest as your body needs, movement that's not punishing, but rather that rejoices in your body and your strength, and to take care of your emotional needs. Like, those are the key things everybody deserves. And hearing that message can be helpful. So if you have somebody that you're like, yeah, that is definitely not happening, they're struggling, I'm super worried about them, taking them aside and just being like in a quiet, safe setting, not in public, not when people are like exhausted or, whatever, and just being like, you don't even have to say anything right now, but I want you to know that I know things aren't okay. And it doesn't have anything to do with the size of your body, although I might be worried about that too. But I can tell your brain is working differently, and I know you're not fueling yourself right. And because I love you, my question to you is, who are you going to tell about this so that I don't have to? And like, sometimes it's just like, you don't have to be your friend's therapist. Like, your friend can be like, first of all, I hate you and you suck. Second of all, thank you for noticing. I could probably talk to the school counselor about this, or I have an aunt or whatever, and just be like, okay, I'm just gonna like check in with you next week and make sure you talk to somebody. Because I love you enough that if you haven't, I will. I will. Another thing to say, if they're like, get defensive, because that can happen, is the act of getting defensive when a friend says, I love you, I'm worried about you, shows that there's actually a problem. So if somebody says to you like, hey, there's kind of a funny looking mole on the back of your back, I'm a little bit worried about it, I think you should go to the dermatologist and get it checked out. No one's like, I don't have a mole, you have a mole. Your mole's bigger than my mole. Like, I don't even have a mole, I don't know what you're talking about. It's like a freckle, it's not even a mole. No one says that. So when someone gets really defensive, it's almost like, and there's the proof. Because if you go up to someone and you're like, yo, I'm really worried about you, etc., they might be like, hey, thank you so much. Actually, I've been going through this like really big problem with my intestines. I've been working on it. I'm worried about myself too. I have a doctor. I have this, I have that. I promise, like, I'm on top of it. That feels much better than if someone's like, what are you even talking about? Everything's fine.
That's so true, exactly. Like that, when someone's defending, it's like when you're like, that's how you can tell someone's lying to you often as well, like when they're like over explaining the situation.
Totally, because they
one
need
of
to
the
cover something
telltale
up.
signs. Exactly, they feel like they have to like overcompensate or somehow defend this idea. So I think that that's really deep and really meaningful, and like if you see someone struggling, it's important to say something and try to get them to help themselves, but if they can't, then to step and help them out, or at least take that first step, so then someone else can help them continue on. And also know that whether it's your friend or a family member, you don't have to be their therapist or like be there for them.
I think that's a really big problem that like happens, is that you're talking with your friend and maybe you finally got them to tell you about it, and now it seems like the only reason why they're talking to you about it is as if you're acting as their therapist. And the problem is then it takes a burden on you, it takes a burden on your mental health. It makes you feel like, oh, I don't know if I can handle this, but I also don't want to just leave them all by themselves. And so I think it's also important, if they're not reaching out for help, for you to reach out for them, because even if they get mad at you, I think it's for the best.
Exactly. And in the end, I think looking back, they'll be like, oh, they really cared about me because they wanted to help me out and help me get out of a troublesome time.
I think the long-term result, if you're saving a life, is more important than, oh, they're going to be mad at me for, I don't know, a month or two.
They probably will be mad, and that's part of the disorder. And so if they're mad at you and you're feeling like, yo, I need to take some space, you can totally name that and be like, I know what I'm doing is right, and I'm so sorry you're mad, and you can feel like I'm a snitch, but the fact is that I can tell you as a doctor who's done this for 16 years that people come to me and they're like, no one said anything. So I figured I wasn't sick enough. I figured that like it was okay and nobody really cared. Even if they would have been defensive at the time, the better thing is to say, you matter, this matters. I need somebody who's an expert to help you with this.
Definitely.
Exactly, yeah.
And I think that just, oftentimes many kids say that healthy eating is important, but sometimes in this case it's taken too far. So what would you say the best way to kind of shut off negative food talk? Like, for example, like, I shouldn't eat cake because it's unhealthy, because sometimes it can lead to this sort of thing.
Yeah, that's a great question. So our society is obsessed with so-called health. Unfortunately, a lot of the time what people mean by health is thinness, because a lot of my patients are unbelievably unhealthy and suicidally depressed, and they have organ failure, and people will walk up to them on the street and be like, "Oh my God, you look amazing, you're so healthy." So there's this like image that people think goes with health. And the same thing goes for people who say might recover from anorexia. And of course, they restore weight and their bodies are wonderful and perfect. And yet they don't look as thin as they once did. And Hollywood actors have talked about how when they were most unhealthy, they were the most praised for looking healthy. And when they got the most healthy, that's when people were like, "Oh, you've clearly let yourself go." So there is huge pressure to look a certain way and to behave a certain way. The best nutritional science says no food is off limits except the foods you're allergic to. That there is no food that is bad as long as you're eating a reasonable balance of things and you're reasonably in moderation most of the time. And like that's as far as I'll go on any of that. I think houses should be able to have all the foods in them, because anyone listening to this who grew up in a house where you're not allowed to have sugar knows that the first thing you do when you go to a friend's house is you go to their pantry and you find their candy. And you might eat in a way that feels almost like scarily animalistic. You're like, "Oh my, what am I doing? I like cannot stop eating this." And it's not because sugar addiction exists. It doesn't. It's because when we're restrained from having something, we were literally evolved to crave huge amounts of it. I like to say that when your ancestors and mine were walking through the rocky tundra thousands of years ago and we didn't have enough to eat, and they came upon the edge of a forest with a beehive, what they didn't do was like dip their finger in, like, "Well, that was tasty, honey, let's move on." They like knocked it down and they emptied it all out completely, because not because they had a sugar addiction, but because that's how they survived that. So that's how humans are wired. When you say you can't have something, you're going to crave it and you might even binge it. So staying even keeled, staying, recognize that every food has a place, and then modeling for each other. Like one of your defiances against my generation and stay rebellious is to eat nice, delicious, wonderful things in a reasonable variety and not say after that, "I shouldn't have eaten this. I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have done that." But be like, "Yeah, because just last night when I was watching the Super Bowl, I had my beautiful thing of nachos, and then my daughter had made an amazing chocolate cake the week before, and I had a huge slice of chocolate cake, and I had two slices the night that she made it because it's my favorite cake, and I didn't feel any concern whatsoever." And I think it's worth saying that like our society is set up so that as a thin, privileged person, I can say that and it's praiseworthy. If I happened to be in a fat body and I talked that way, there would be a sense of like judgment of like, "Oh, well, that's why you look that way." And the truth is that no matter what body size you have, every human needs to eat consistently throughout the day, foods that satisfy, the real deal, not like, "I'm in the mood for a cookie, but I'm gonna have a protein bar." Like, eat the cookie, enjoy it, savor it, and recognize that like our bodies were built to balance things out.
I love that. And I love how, no matter what your body looks like, you need to eat consistently and not feel bad for what you have, because I mean, we have one life and it's, you got to
Exactly.
enjoy every moment,
Make the most of
including
it.
all the delicious food in this world. And of course, sometimes you're allergic to some things, so you can't have it. But other than that, everything in like a balance, everything in moderation is really the key to, not binging or like intensely craving
Totally.
certain foods. Exactly. How can parents, if any parents listening to this podcast, create a balance between encouraging healthy eating habits but also avoiding overly restricting and controlling behavior?
The first thing that I would say to parents is to do your own work. Therapy is amazing. I've done plenty of therapy in the past. I've never had an eating disorder, but therapy is amazing for all. It's not accessible to all, but it is amazing for all. And so if parents have their own echoes of how they were raised and their experiences in their bodies, do some work on it if you can. And if you can't do it directly, listen to podcasts where they're hearing the very best recommendations and information to help sort of heal some of those old wounds, because otherwise you're likely to project it onto your kids eventually someday, and you won't want to, but it will happen. And no parent is perfect. goodness knows that's true, and we can't try to be. So if we realize as we like learn more about this that we weren't doing the most awesome job, name it. There's nothing a teenager likes more than when your parent says, I was wrong. So just going to your kid and being like, hey, I've been doing some learning. I realized I've kind of messed things up. Like I've talked about my own diet or my own dislike of my body or, your aunt's weight loss or whatever. Like I talked about it too much and I realized that that was not healthy for you and it wasn't right. And I'm really sorry. And I'm going to work on doing it differently. So I'm open to like hearing your thoughts on how that affected you. That makes a huge difference. So just that like acknowledgement piece. And then going forward, I have a few little tips that I share with parents, like don't talk about your own body or other people's bodies positively or negatively. Don't be like, oh, I lost weight, oh, I gained weight, so and so looks so amazing. Zip it. Talk about who they are as humans. Do not discuss that. Don't talk about food and exercise as things that need to be like compensated for or be made guilty of. Eat your food, move your body in a way that brings you joy and strength according to like how your body is able to do that. But don't talk about like, oh, I'm trying to change my body or oh, it's spring break and I have to put on a bathing suit. Nope, because your kid is listening. Um, Allow them their emotions, I think is so important. Um, Allow a wide range of foods and continue to be open to like listening to what it is that they're hearing from their peers or from social media about bodies so that you can be like a trusted resource. Because a lot of parents will be like, I just want them to be prepared for the world that they're going to come to because it's not a particularly kind world. And the answer is they're going to have an abundance of exposure to that world. If you can make your home a safe place for them to have their body, to have their feelings, and to have their needs met, it's like a vaccine against really getting a bad form of the disease that society is trying to impose upon us. Because if home can be safe, then your kid can go out with more strength.
I absolutely love that because I know that sometimes like at school or at activities it's impossible to like shield yourself from all those kids and everything they've been through and what they talk about and what they exhibit. But if you can come home and be reassured that you are beautiful and you got to fuel your body and move it in like a way that is like helping you build strength and feel good rather than as a punishment or to look a certain way, I think that can really help, keep a strong mindset about body image and food. And also, I think that a lot of those tips are incredible for both parents and teenagers, like to exhibit into your own life. Nobody needs to be talking about how other people look. You can just say, oh my gosh, they're so sweet or so kind or friendly. There's no need to make it about their appearance. So I absolutely love that.
So what do you do every day that brings you a small bit of happiness?
Oh, I seek more than a small bit of happiness every day. Fortunately, I seek like a brimming cup of happiness. I do a lot of things. I love to read YA fantasy. It is my favorite. Yes, I was a Harvard English major, and YA fantasy is my favorite genre. So I love to escape, and I just do that without any apology whatsoever. I love to take a walk with a dear friend and have a good conversation. I love to just like catch up with my husband. I love to snuggle my kids who still snuggle me. It makes me so happy. And I just feel like physical closeness is so helpful. And at work, I work with basically some of my best friends in the whole world. And so talking through things that make us laugh and make us cry just allows for the full spectrum of a lived experience.
Oh, I love that. What's your favorite book that you've read recently?
Oh my gosh, that's so, so tough. I read a lot. I am currently rereading a Sarah Maas book. It's the first of her Crescent City trilogy because the third one is about to come out. And so, of course, I need to read the first two again. It's a little bit spicy, so for people whose parents don't allow spiciness, that's not going to be your thing, but it's an amazing, amazing fantasy trilogy.
Oh, I love that. And you're right. You always have to
Yeah,
catch up before
totally.
the new book comes out.
Yeah, my friend I think has read some of that series and
So
enjoyed it. But yeah, I also had I used to read a lot more YA fantasy as well. And so there's a lot of really good books there and I know my friend at school, she reads a lot of those. And so you'll always catch her during the day after she's finished her work. She has like an online reading or something. So she'll be reading on there all day. And
I
reading
love
really
that.
brings a lot of happiness.
It is. And same with spending time with family
Totally.
and friends. So do you have a specific motivational quote that you love and remember? And if you do, would you mind sharing it with us and the significance that it brings you?
That is such a good question. Let me see if I can rummage one up in my brain.
I know there's so many good quotes out there.
Exactly.
Yeah, there absolutely are. Here's what I'll tell you. I don't have a specific quote, but having grown up loving poetry so much, like that's where my brain goes when there's a specific situation. Even with a patient, you don't necessarily associate doctors and poetry, but like sometimes something we've read or a poem really summarizes an emotion beautifully and allows you to kind of put it out there and take a look at it. So it's really often that I'll think of a poem that I love because of something a patient's saying. I'll be like, wait, can I just read you this? And the thing that I would have people read more than almost anything right now is by Andrea Gibson. It's their latest book of poetry called You Better Be Lightning. And they write about mental health in a way that is so beautiful. They're now the Colorado Poet Laureate. And it just like my daughter and I both read their book when we were on an airplane, and it was during COVID and we were wearing masks, and we were like filling our mask with tears, but in like good, happy tears of seeing how somebody can express themselves so richly and speak to your heart.
Oh, I love that. And I agree. Poetry or like quotes from different poems is also such a beautiful place to find like motivation or ideas, comfort, etc. I love
our
that.
dad actually, he sends us poems about like once a day or a few times a day into our family group chat.
Like
and
little,
it's so nice to
short
read them, and it brings
poems.
you kind of a little bit of
Definitely.
motivation and happiness during the day.
Yes. Yeah. So do you have anything exciting coming up that you would like to share with us? Any goals, events, etc.?
Yeah, I will share with you a boundary that I put up because my older daughter is a senior and this is our last couple of months of her living at home. I just decided that I was going to say no to a lot of stuff that I would love to say yes to, whether that's speaking engagements or writing or things that I think are super worthwhile and that I've loved to take part in before. But because this is a year when I just want to be home more, and when I'm home, I want to be like present, I said no. And that can be painful. And not everybody can like give you an applause when you set boundaries. But the truth is that only I know what my needs are and only I can truly defend them. So I have been so satisfied doing that. And I still feel incredibly proud of the work I'm doing. Plus, I know I'm doing the right thing by being home a little bit more.
That time together is so special and definitely not something to miss. So I love that. And boundaries are also just as important.
Exactly.
Like prioritizing yourself and your needs and fulfilling that is just as important as, speaking at a huge event.
Exactly. And family time as well. I think it's just so important to spend time with loved ones, especially if like your daughter is about to move away and go to university. So it's just important to spend as much time as possible.
So is there anywhere that our audience can find you if they want to learn more or keep up with you?
Yeah, thank you so much. Totally. On social media, we're at Gaudiani Clinic, which is Gaudiani Clinic. Our website is gaudianiclinic.com, and my book Sick Enough is available on Amazon, and it just has a lot of patient stories to show what happens when you develop an eating disorder so that people can understand better what's going on in their bodies and can advocate better for themselves within the medical system they have access to.
That's amazing. Wonderful. And we will make sure all of that is linked in the show notes so it's easy access for anyone listening that wants to check it out and learn more.
Amazing. You both are fabulous, and I wish you the best of luck, and I'm like so impressed.
Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of Hack Your Happiness.
And a huge thank you to Dr. Gaudiani for being our guest this week. Her message and her work and just her in general are all so inspiring and incredible. And I think that we need more positivity shed on body image and properly fueling and moving our bodies, especially as teenagers. I mean, I think we can all think of at least one person in our lives, even whether it's you or a close friend or somebody at school or an extracurricular who may struggle sometimes with feeling their best. And even if it's not an eating disorder, we all can struggle to feel confident and good with how we look and not compare ourselves to social media or, TV shows or movies. So I think that no matter where you are at with your relationship with food and your body, it's important to, maintain a good love and care for our bodies. Now, Anastasia, what is your biggest takeaway from today's interview?
My biggest takeaway is to make sure that you fill your needs in specific, because society has a whole bunch of other, they might think that you need this and that, but in the end, only you know what you need. And, if other people think that what you're doing, isn't productive and you should be doing something else, it's just important to focus on yourself, because in the end, that's all that matters, and you should be your own best friend and kind of support yourself and treat yourself with kindness.
And that's how you can, prevent a really big, like Dr. G said, that oftentimes eating disorders are a manifestation of a long time of you, going through challenges or not putting yourself first. And so a good way to prevent a severe issue from happening is to, put those stops in place and make sure that you ask yourself, what do I need to do? And if this were a friend and I was talking to a friend, what would I advise them to do? So I think that's a really great takeaway. My biggest takeaway from today is don't talk negatively about other people's bodies. That includes your own body. Think about other people, because the way that you think about other people then reflects onto the way that you think of yourself. If you're constantly thinking, oh, this ideal body type is gorgeous, but I'm not like that, then you're gonna look down on yourself and feel low self-confidence. But if you say, you know what, how we look like on the outside has so little to do with who we genuinely are, and so I'm going to focus on who people are, deep inside, what they're good at, their strengths, their humor, who they are, their personality. Even if you don't get along super well with everyone, focus on who they are as a person rather than the body that they're in. Just like when we talked with Terry Hofford,
Totally.
Asha said your body is just like your shell, like you're inside your body, of course, but that's all it is. It's just a protective barrier that keeps you going, and we have to be grateful for that. But it's important to, love yourself deeper than that and appreciate and recognize others for deeper than that. And when we see others for who they truly are, not just their body, we can start to see ourselves for who we truly are as well.
Exactly. And when you see, yourself comparing another person to yourself or yourself to another person, just kind of stop yourself and think, maybe, what are 3 things that I like about this person? Maybe you're not that good of friends with them. Just take a step back and think of your 3, things that you really like about that
Even
person.
if you don't really like that person, because I know as teenagers that happens, but think about maybe they're like really motivated, or they have a strong work ethic, or they're good in a specific subject or sport. Like there's always something.
It's really important to just shift your thinking, and instead of, for every thought you have with that, replace it with 3 thoughts about their personality instead.
Exactly.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave us a 5-star review from wherever you're listening. It really helps us out and we really appreciate it.
Also, support our podcast and join our happiness family by subscribing and following this podcast on whichever platform you're listening to. And we'll see you next time.
See you next time.